Once again, good morning, everybody, ladies and gentlemen. My role here today is to stimulate some conversation and get some debates going. If the question is directed at me directly, I'll try and answer it as best as I can. But questions should also be directed at our panelists here, so that in their expertise, in their particular areas, they can give you those answers. So I'm going to try and set a platform from where the questions can come from. During the course of the 2 days, 2 points have stuck in my mind. One of them is female, and another one has been getting entrance into the industry, and how do we actually get into the industry, and what's restricting the entrance into the industry. So what I'd like to do is just try and unpack what the lift industry is, and then let's see from the questions coming from the floor how the panelists can address them, that we can take notes of these and develop future action plans and outcomes from this. So we know the status of the lift industry at the moment. We heard from PWD yesterday that approximately only 50% of their buildings have reliable lifts. And people, including Madam MSC, have had the experience of being stuck in a lift. And it's not a great experience, as I explained in my talk yesterday. It's not pleasant to be stuck in a lift for any length of time, particularly if you have a medical condition. So let's have a look what the lift industry in South Africa is. We have, obviously, before we can get into a lift, we need a manufacturer to manufacture lifts. Under manufacturing, we have an infrastructure that needs to be built in order to manufacture that lift. We need engineering in that manufacturing, and that engineering of a lift has to comply with certain standards. So in South Africa, when we want to install a lift, we are governed by a set of rules and standards. And here's where I take out my wooden spoon: how well are those standards administered and how well are they implemented? Because if we have very poor lifts in the country, my question, and I open it up, is to say, why was that lift installed in the first place? How did it get installed? How was it approved for installation, and how has it been maintained? So the aspects of the lift industry: one is the engineering and the manufacturing of a lift. The second very important factor when it comes to elevators and lifts is how it is installed. So the people who install the lift, what are their qualifications? How do they fit into the whole scenario? Who is controlling them? And how did they get to be where they are? So was it just somebody that was maybe a fitter and turner, and he decided that putting in a lift is just like making a Meccano set, and let me put it in, and away I go. So again, I'll stir the pot a little bit here and say, an installer of a lift, does he need some form of title, qualification, recognition, accreditation? Then I take it on to the third step, which from installation, obviously, the lift has to be serviced. Now, it is not necessary that a lift is serviced by the company that installed the lift. So the service provider, as we call it, can be anybody who has the necessary skills at his disposal to make them available to the owner of the lift to service the lift. Now I want to get my wooden spoon out again and say, is that service provider qualified to service that particular lift? Does he have the necessary skills with training? Have people that he's got deemed to be competent persons, maybe coming through Jackie or somebody like that, where they have the accreditation to actually do it, and that it's not somebody that was pulled off the street just because we think that he's got the right qualification. So we've gone through manufacturing, we've gone through installation, we've gone through the service provider. And we have the fourth aspect of the industry, which is the inspection authority. headed up by the DOL that gets accreditation via SANUS. You cannot be a registered, accredited inspection authority without that. You've gone through the rigors of going through an accreditation. The accreditation goes over to the DOL, who then allow you, they give you certification that will permit you to do those inspections. Except that you have to maintain your accreditation. And if you're not maintaining accreditation, it can be taken away with you at the stroke of a brush. So then you're not able to inspect a lift. Having done that, it affects the whole industry, because if you haven't got the necessary inspection document, you may actually not inspect the lift, so you don't get your certification to run your lift, and you end up having lifts running out there that are not getting inspected, and they are maybe becoming unsafe. So those are the aspects. There's 4 aspects there, and obviously the other one is how do we sustain it? The sustainability of the industry comes via training. It comes from infrastructure and investments. So we've heard now from the MEC about public-private enterprises. You also got your private and you've got your public. So there's 3 markets there that are basically sustaining the lift industry. And each one of them is very important. MEC mentioned about 18 new buildings, or 18 buildings that need either renovating or brand new. So there's a market there already to be tapped into. So I want to go back now. That's the platform that I'm setting. And when you're asking your questions, I'd like you just to, maybe on the basis of that platform, if you can direct your question at that particular platform, so then we can then see which panelist here might be best suited to answer your question. So I'm just going to open it up here and start right at the beginning where I was, and start with the manufacturing, because we see outside there's quite a number of manufacturers out there. Some of them I haven't even heard of, because they're coming from the international market. So there's obviously going to be some form of barriers and restrictions for them to enter the market. And we've heard from we heard both from PWD, now from the MEC today, about why aren't we manufacturing our own lifts? Why are we importing lifts that sustains other countries' economic growth whilst we import it? So I want to open up the floor now for questions, and maybe I can be a bit vindictive here, because I was asked to do this very late last night, so I'm going to throw it right back at Segrin and ask the question, his opinion of about the status of manufacturing of lifts in South Africa, or that the fact that we import lifts from outside, and why, in his opinion, he thinks that is.
Hi. Thank you, Bill. On the manufacturing side, as you're aware, we are involved in the manufacturing sector on the elevator segment, where we have a factory that's manufacturing the stainless steel and the mild steel side of it. We've had a couple companies come to us to manufacture full complete lifts, and we did it as per drawing. But when we say we do it as per drawing, that means we are manufacturing exactly what the manufacturer expects out of us. But to do our own design and do the manufacturing in-house, right now the capability of that, within the factory environment, do not have that. But I guess in the near future, on the mechanical side, I think in South Africa, we are fully equipped to do the mechanical build-up of an elevator. On the electrical side, the IP is no longer in the country. I know many years ago, when we were making the mine elevators, a lot of the majority of the components were made locally. But I think going forward, if you give ourselves a 3 to 5 year plan, The mechanical components can easily be done within the country. The expertise is here. But the electrical, we will have to look for a partner from the outside that will come and set up a manufacturing plant with us and train our people. Maybe it'll take 3 to 5 years, I believe, to set up the electrical components. Because on the motor side, I know that there's well-equipped people within the country. We have copper available. We can rewind motors, we can do it, but making the shell of the motor, we will have to engage with partners for that. So, and to get our productivity and efficiency up to standard. The productivity and efficiency seen from the Indian market or the Chinese market is much more efficient than what we can start with if we were to begin something like this. But Bill, I believe the opportunity for our country is there, the platform is there, the skills are there. We have many engineers now who are qualified and sitting at home, mechanical and electrical, and I think it's more to do with the training and development and then getting the numbers out. Maybe for South Africa, for a number of units per year, we averaging between 2,500 to 3,000 units that are being sold new. But I think if you look at the continent, you're dealing between 40 to 50,000 units that are imported, majority from China. So I think with a medium-term view, I think we can definitely look at starting up and look at manufacturing locally.
Thanks, Ebrahim. I think we have a question at the back there.
Who's it?
Thank you so much for the opportunity. My name is Zanokolo. I'm calling from the South African Property Owners Association. My question is directed to the statement that Mr. Segrin has made, and I don't know who from the panelists will answer me, Bill. My question is that with all the artisan colleges, all the skill set we do have from our experienced colleagues within the industry, why is it that we still have such a poor infrastructure, such poor lift and escalators within the country? On the positive side, where are we going with the lift and escalator industry, and how are we going to get to where we're supposed to be? Even though foreign investments is good, but when are we as a country going to, and how we as a country going to actually start developing and start doing things for ourselves? Thank you.
Very good question there. Any of my fellow panelists here like to offer an answer there? Mr. Monyaki. You need your mic. From a perspective of the regulator, Mr. Monyaki's with the DOL, maybe he can put his perspective on that, but I'd also, after he's answered that, I'm going to throw it out, and if nobody puts up their hand, I'm going to specifically pick on some maintenance service providers.
Thank you so much. I hope you can all hear me. Yeah. Okay. We are fortunate to have Jackie amongst us, and if you go to her exhibition stand, she has established a training center. In that for quite some time as the department, we have been concerned that we don't seem to be capacitating mechanics, engineers in this specific industry. And we have been advocating for an independent training provider that would ensure that we've got competent people that would service and install equipment in this country. However, the regulation is very clear that for you to do maintenance on a specific installation, you have to be competent. It has always been there. And we've got trades, we've got QCTOs that are responsible for the development, the CETAs, sorry, that are responsible for development of qualifications. So we do have qualifications. We do have providers that are willing to capacitate people. All that we need is support from the maintenance the maintenance service providers. We need the multinationals to support skills development in this specific industry. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Monyaki.
Okay, I'll also try to come in and address that issue. As much as I might not have the solution, but I think this is what this panel today is all about. It's about us coming together, us trying to put the problems that we are currently having and the problems that are going to affect us in the future as an industry. The reason why we opened the training center is because I identified that gap as a consultant, because I established myself as Qwabe Business Enterprise as a consultant initially. But when my clients were asking, where are the skills? Who is the competent company that I can use? I could only name the multinationals. And obviously, they had gone around the clients. And the clients would say, as a country, is that all that you can give me? Then it opened my eyes to say, you know what, there's nobody else. Where is the youth? We are all aging in the industry. If you look at the stalls and you look at ownership, there's no young entrepreneurs. There's no young black entrepreneurs. There's no young white entrepreneurs. What is happening to the industry? Hence, the lifts that are getting stuck often. Hence, the escalators that are stopping all the time. So, as a collective, every one of us here, it's a challenge that we are facing, and it is real. It's not going to go away up until we do something about it. So we need now to stop working in silos and say, we can't keep on doing things in the same way, and they're not working. Somebody needs to say, let's steer this ship into the other direction. Let's try the untested and see if we are going to achieve positive results. I am concerned. Wearing a head of LEA, number one. Wearing a head of my own business, number two. Being concerned as a citizen to say, what are our youth going to, what are they learning from us? Are we really going to kill the skill in Africa and let people from outside take over? Because it's exactly what is going to happen. So I am observant. I've noted your question, and I'm throwing it to all the competent people here, all the skill that is here in its different angles, to say we need to do something about it. It is not going to go away. Instead, it's getting worse and worse. Here are the learners. Here are the young people. Let's try to accommodate them. Let's absorb them and pass on the baton. Let's give them the best so that they can be the quality. They can be the voice. They can be the our tomorrow. At the moment, that's what I can go on and go on. But let me give my other colleagues a chance to also give their input.
Thanks, Jackie. Just to identify, is there any of the multinationals here in the audience? Otis, Schindler? Mr. Scholz, I want to throw it in your direction then. If you'd just like to tell the people what your current position is with Otis, so we don't put you too much on a spot or ask you questions that you're not able to answer.
Okay, morning everybody. My name is Kurt, and I'm the training manager for Otis Elevators. So we run a training center, and we have about 66 learners that we train up for the industry. So I don't know, are there anything else that I need to add?
Thanks, Kurt. That sets the background. No, don't put the mic down yet. Because I want to ask you the question now. As being part of a multinational, what commitment is Otis giving to the industry in the training of our future youth to sustain this industry going forward? Without going too much into sharing any plans of the company that you're not supposed to be sharing, but what direction, what commitment does the company have in ensuring that the industry has sufficient well-trained artisans available to service lifts or even install lifts in the future?
Okay. On behalf of Otis, let me just expand on our plans. We have 66 learners at this stage, and some of those learners will be retained within the Otis operation, and some of those learners will be free to apply into all the other companies for employment. We cannot employ all 66 at the same time. So basically that's their commitment to train up and make mechanics available to the industry. We have two streams of mechanics. One is the learnerships and one is an apprenticeship. So we have both streams available, and we are training up these learners and apprentices for the industry and for internal operations. So I think that's the commitment in terms of the way forward. Is we work with the Merseta to help us get the qualifications through QCTO. And we use NEM and QCTO as the quality assurers of our trade that we present. So we do have that structures in place with the help of Merseta, NEM and QCTO.
Thank you. Can I ask another question out here, because we have many of the smaller entities here as well. Is there any discussions amongst yourselves? Do you ever have a get-together amongst yourselves to talk about the lack of skills in the industry, or are we actually as an industry providing for the future of the industry in that there will be sufficient of engineers, technicians available, no matter where they are trained, but there is an indication that the industry needs, and I'll just use a figurative figure, say 1,000 technicians that need to be distributed throughout the country. Is there any discussions in there and to say that we do have a lack of technicians and we do need to engage with other training facilities to ensure that we've got a continual flow of people in and out the industry? And the reason I say that is because the lift industry has been one of those industries that has been a stepping block to future careers. Not necessarily that those people come into the industry as artisans or learners, and they manage to get through the industry and eventually end up, a lot of them end up with MBAs, end up running other small businesses or partner with other people. Is there any discussion about on that baseline where that encourages young people to come into the industry and that there is a career path for them?
It is
not necessarily aimed at Kurt. I'm throwing it open to everybody, and I'm going to throw it back to Jackie as well as sitting on the Lift Engineering Association. So maybe Jackie, you'd like to say something there.
Okay.
Start with Kurt.
Our forum that we use would be the LEA and NEM, and those are the two forums that would guide training and development in the industry. But if I can recall, we don't have a collective body or a representative body that would represent.
Sorry, he's having trouble with the mic.
Yeah. So basically what we are saying is that at this moment in time there's four training centers, which is Mickey sitting on my left, Jackie sitting on the forum, and then Shinlenas. So between the four, we do not have a collective body where we can voice out the needs of the industry or do an analysis of what the industry looks like from a training perspective. We all work on individual targets and processes because the training is very, very expensive. And what the government does at this moment in time is to support a percentage of our training, and they cannot support the full training as such. So each company looks at their needs first and where they are in the industry and how this will affect the bottom line, because everything that we do affects the finances of the.
Thanks, Kurt. I think let's give Jackie maybe a chance to jump in here.
Okay, to jump in as LEA, from representing LEA, is that, training is one of the pillars that we are looking at for the survival of the industry. Yes, we do have a committee that looks into training, but, unfortunately, we cannot put together, an association that can deal with that and address. And our industry, how it is. There is information that is privy for share and information that is not privy for share. Hence, I appeal and say, this is what we need to do something about. And the information for the training center, for the training, based on the LEA side, is coming from the members of the LEA. And we've got only companies, about 14 companies as members of LEA, and only 4 companies that are doing training. So honestly, we are not sharing this information as LEA. But if I then speak from a small business side, is that training is very expensive. It doesn't come cheap. I've started on this journey of training since 2008. To date, I've not even made a cent. So it's not something that you can say you'll take it as a business and say you will prosper. It is, you've got to take it as passion. You've got to look at it and say, I am passionate about building for the industry. So we are training for passion. I think Mickey can also bear testimony to it, to say it's not an easy road that we are going through.
Thanks, Jackie. So basically, as the understanding that I have from that discussion is that we don't have a collective agreement here as to how many technicians need to be trained up on an annual basis and how they flow through the system. So one of the actions and outcomes maybe coming out from here is for a group of people, and this is just a suggestion, that there are people who need to get together to discuss what are the needs of the industry and not me as an individual, or not my company as an individual. That's maybe one of the things that could be looked at going forward in future. But let's move on from the training, because I don't know whether we managed to answer the gentleman from Sapoa's question, but one of the reasons that lifts... sorry?
There's a question there.
Sorry, there's a question over there. Okay.
Can I ask? Okay. In terms of South Africa, especially to the sister there who's busy with the training, my question to the industry leaders for the lifts is, what you guys are doing with regards to the transformation in the following sense? One, those are trained technically as artisans to become business leaders of tomorrow in order to answer the issue of the business startups. Because if you look at the graphs in terms of the industry, there is a huge gap in terms of those that are leading and those that are on the ground. And secondly, the trend of maintaining the lifts in terms of repairing it, there is a trend of poor quality, more especially on public buildings or public works, not public works, but the public buildings. Because if you look at you find that a company will come and fix a lift and then tomorrow it's broken. So what is the industry doing to ensure that there's a high quality assurance? Because unfortunately it affects all of us in terms of tax. We all pay tax in terms of the public buildings. As we heard yesterday, about 50% of the buildings. So I just want clarity on that so that I can understand more about the plans that you guys are doing for future. Thanks.
Help me out. I didn't get the question.
Sorry?
Help me out. I didn't get the question.
So basically, as I understand, the gentleman had two questions there. One is on transformation and access into the industry. And the second one was on to do with the maintenance and how the industry is ensuring that the buildings, the lifts and that are maintained correctly. Sanjeev, you've been very quiet this morning. Maybe we should jump in with you there.
Thanks. So I'm going to try and answer your query and touch on the query from the other gentleman from Sapoa. And his query also sort of revolved around reliability, service, etc. But just specifically on your query on transformation, I was fortunate because the current regulations, as published, we were part of that panel. The one aspect on the regulation is the definition of a service provider. It's very, very clear. You can be a single person. You can be a single person and be a service provider. It's catered for in the regulation. As long as you have the competence and you can fulfill that task, as a single person, self-employed person, you can be a service provider. So in terms of any restriction on who can and cannot be a service provider, there isn't any restriction. It's a matter of having technical competence and, of course, complying with the laws of the country to have an entity registered. So obviously, if there hasn't been significant growth in that aspect, or there hasn't been too much competition, that's something as an industry, we need to look at. But what I can assure you is that despite people possibly only knowing the larger lift companies, multinationals, etc., in terms of actual service providers in this country, there's more than 150. There's more than 150. Not everybody has the same level of exposure, and obviously not everybody has the same level of visibility in the market. But we're living in a country which is democratic, number one, and it's competitive, number two. So if you want to grow your business and get exposure, that's, you've got to develop a method to do that. So that's one aspect. So there's no limitation in terms of the transformation. There's nothing to limit transformation. And I can say this with a bit of authority because I also sit on the engineering council. And there is a transformation policy regarding committees, committee structures, etc., etc. So that's working out fine. But the second aspect, which is very important, where you queried something regarding reliability The gentleman from Sapo as well also queried the issue about reliability. You know, we need to look at some facts about this industry. Because the thing about training, development, very, very important. Knowledge transfer, sustainability, growth in terms of competence, very, very important aspect of this industry. And it's not unique to this industry. As a country, it's an important aspect. But if we look at this industry in particular,
Just keep your mic up, Sanjeev.
there are three major parties who are the participants that everything revolves around. The first person or the first party is the owner of the equipment, whether it's a parastatal, whether it's an individual, whether it's a private company, etc. So you have the owner of the equipment. The owner of the equipment by law has to abide by the Occupational Health and Safety Act. Then you get the party that maintains the equipment, the lift service provider. Then you have another party that certifies the lift. That's called inspection service provider, the company with the lift inspectors. In this country, for all the lifts that we have in this country, we only have 18 inspection companies, only 18. Ironically, the 18 companies have to check on every lift after it's installed and thereafter every 2 years. The inspection companies are the ones that are the most heavily regulated. You cannot operate as an inspection company. You have to have a certain level of competence, you have to be registered with the Engineering Council, and you have to be accredited by SABS. That is how you become an inspection company. And as I said, the inspection company checks the lift once when it's installed, and every 24 months thereafter. But the companies who are the service providers, who are employed to do the maintenance, who essentially are checking lifts every month for the thousands and thousands of lifts that we have in this country, and which they check every month, they are not regulated. They are not regulated. There is no prescript that they have to belong to an association. There is no code of practice. There is nothing. So the irony in the equation is you have the owners who bear the liability of the equipment through the insurer and who pay for the stuff to get done. And they obviously they are bound by the laws of the country. You have the other entity, which is only 18 inspection companies who are heavily regulated. But you got these 150 odd, or however many more, service providers who are not regulated. So on the one hand, as I say, it's very, very important that we have to look at initiatives to strengthen the knowledge base, to focus on knowledge transfer, to focus on growth on personnel, and to get companies to measure profit not only via EBIT, after tax, etc. You've got to measure social profit by how much of a difference are you making to society and to the citizens of the country. You have to measure profit like that. So we have to focus on growth in terms of knowledge, training, etc. But we must not fool ourselves into believing that if we are going to train an extra 100 people per month, that's going to solve the problem. We got the issue where the people who do the most of the work, the bulk of the work, the maintenance, these 150, 170 service providers who are not regulated at all. So we need to get to a stage somewhere down the line where this maintenance activity is regulated. There was an intention to have it done. Somehow it fell by the wayside. With the result, if you, as the owner of the building, or you from a parastatal, etc., if you are experiencing serious problems regarding reliability, etc., you scratch to find to who do you complain? To who do you complain? And there is nobody. If you're in a vehicle, you can complain to an RMI, or if you're in a hospital and there's a problem with the X-ray machine, there is an association to handle that. But that's where the problem is. The service providers are not regulated, and there is no formal body to represent all the service providers.
Sanjeev, may I just add, Bill, as well? I don't want to comment on the manufacturing setup, but as far as accreditation is concerned, and the gentleman's question, what are we doing about transformation? I know it is seen as a barrier to become an inspection body because of the fact that the accreditation process is seen to be expensive and that the requirements are seen to be harsh. Now, what SANAS can do, and we have done in other sectors of industry in which we accredit, if a group of people, typically an association or from a regulatory authority, come to SANAS and say that we have a group of people who are part of registered companies who would like to become accredited, SANAS can partner with those people to provide the basic training, and this is now not the technical training, but the training on the management system. Those of you who were here on Tuesday would have heard Mr. Malatsi talking about the ISO IEC 17020 document, and that is the basic management system that the AIAs have to comply with. Now, the biggest barrier to entry, in my opinion, into the AIA arena is the knowledge of 17020. And that is something that does not come naturally to any person because the majority of you are technical people, and now to be able to be accredited as an AIA, you have to implement this management system, which also involves a lot of non-technical work. So from the SANAS side, we can partner and provide the basic training in terms of the 17020 system for people who come from previously disadvantaged sectors of industry, and that is available. So if there are any such groupings who would like to make use of it, you are welcome to contact SANAS. I think you all have my details, so that we can see how we can get together and at least open that area and make it easier for you to enter as an AIA. And then just also lastly, in terms of the fees, once you are accredited, you need to pay an annual fee, and SANAS is more than willing to allow people to come to a payment arrangement with us so that those fees are paid on an annual basis, on a monthly basis and not annually. So as far as transformation is concerned, Bill, that is what SANAS can offer.
Thanks, Linda.
I just want to comment on transformation and support to SMMEs. In this industry, we've got two associations. One is the Lift Engineering Association of South Africa, the LEA. And then the second one is LIASA, Independent Lift Association of South Africa. Now, I believe, because we work closely with those two associations, that it is their responsibility to support people who are interested in participating in this industry. And if those associations haven't got programs to support their members, I think it has to be their responsibility from now on to have programs in place in order to support people who would like to participate in this industry. I think we've got Jackie here as a chairperson of one of the associations. I think she will comment as to what are they doing to support people who are interested in participating in the lift industry. Secondly, I think Mara is from Public Works, and you are one of the owner, stroke users. I think you as the owner, you've got the power and the muscle to transform the industry as well, in that you can put in specific requirements to say that for this particular service, I require this kind of people to service or to work at my equipment or my lifts. So in that way, you are also in a position to transform the industry. Unfortunately, we as the Department of Labor, we can enforce at the moment requirements as stipulated in the regulations. But I believe owners can assist in transforming the industry by putting specific requirements. And yesterday, we had a presentation from the DDG from Public Works. And she mentioned specifically that she is concerned that she come across same companies in most of the buildings. And it is possible to transform or to change that requirement to say, for this particular project, this is the service provider that we would like to appoint for this particular project. So in that way, you are transforming the industry. I want to comment also on the quality of maintenance. The way the regulation is written, it is the responsibility of the user as well to make sure that the service provider that would have appointed do the job that is required to be done. So the user or the owner has got the responsibility also to make sure that the installation is maintained by a competent person or is maintained up to the required standard. And I want to differ with Sanjeev in his statement that service providers are not regulated. They are regulated because they are mentioned in the regulation. The only thing that we don't have is the register of maintenance providers. And we have committed that as part of the long-term plan, we are going to register maintenance providers. They are regulated. If you look at Section 37, we can take them on service providers if they don't do what is expected from them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Monyaki. Is there any from the floor? Is there any comments on what Mr. Monyaki said? Over here first, and then at the back over there.
Thank you. I've got two questions. Then one is about transformation because I was not satisfied about it. I heard when you were talking about 18 companies that are, I don't know what, but in that 18 companies that you are talking about, I think it's next to the lady, between JK and two ladies. So you see, that's then how many black-owned companies yeah, let me say that. And secondly, in that question, if, or maybe the companies that they have joint ventures, or maybe black and white, or that they can say 50-50 black and white, because we are trying to transform South Africa. Because there is these people that they are maybe having skills, but they don't want to share skills. And another question is this, but it's about autism. I want to ask this, can they be able to exchange maybe students with maybe with JK in their training center? Or maybe the modules that they are using is the same standard modules. The last one again is this. Do they, after they finish, they go through the journey of trade test or whatever then? Because I'm aware about JK. I had yesterday we charged and the day, even the day before yesterday, their students, they go, the process that they go to until they reach trade test. So in your company, say, they go the journey of trade test and whatever then? And are you willing maybe to say, JK, the same module, can we do the joint venture to uplift each other? Because there is this tendency of maybe people, if I've got 1 billion, I come and invest in a certain company, I say then, but I want to own everything. Some companies, some investors, they do that. They say, I want to own everything, to change it, to make it maybe a white people's company or a black people's company. But here, what I'm trying to say, this transformation is based on white and black. If maybe the 18 companies that are talking are the white people, are they willing, or if there are black people, are they willing to transform the industry to have, because like AIA, I don't know the statistics of white people there, black people there, the challenges that are there. I'm finished.
Thank you. It's a very good point that the gentleman raises. I'd just like to maybe open it up to the panel here. I'm not sure on the, because you're referring to the AI, it's gone. Yeah. So you're specifically mentioning AIAs. Are you referring to the lift industry as well? Service, installation, manufacturing?
Yes.
So you're looking at the industry as a whole, not just a section of the industry. Yeah. No, I get you. So our purpose here is not to give you an answer, because our job here today is to listen to what you're saying and to take cognizance of what you said and how it fits into the industry as it is now and how it needs to be shaped in the future. Because right now I can say, and I have a company that is also an AIA, but I cannot tell you with any certainty how many AIAs are actually black-owned entities. Cannot tell you that. I can tell you though that I do employ black people to do inspections. But the point is well made, and it's a point that we need to take away as an industry for discussion, and to say, well, how do we then fairly represent the company the country going forward with equitable black representation? Because coming into the industry today, and I would rather let Jackie answer that question, is to say that probably the majority of people entering the industry for the first time as young apprentices or young trainees are all exclusively black. You may not like that answer, but it is a fact. So in the transformation, doesn't happen overnight. It may not happen to the speed that you want it to happen, but it has to happen within the framework of the regulations and the standards. Just because it's a small micro enterprise doesn't mean to say that it does not have to comply with the regulations and the standards. Otherwise, we have the problem that maybe the standards are lacking, maybe the knowledge hasn't been transferred properly, and we end up with unsafe lifts running. So it has to be equitable to all, but we need to examine those restrictive barriers. How does a young black entrepreneur get to be a lift manufacturer? I can't answer that question, but I could start to think about it going forward and say, well, how do we as an industry look at addressing that? One of the factors that I have is to say, well, we've heard from the MEC, we've heard from the DG Public Works, to say, why aren't we manufacturing lifts in South Africa? We used to. We used to manufacture in the 1980s and early 90s. We used to. What changed that we stopped that? And if I was sitting on a panel, because I like to take my bucket and my spade and I like to stir, I would be asking, is it the Labour Relation Act? Did it have anything to do with the fact that we ended up with no manufacturing? Because those are the type of hard questions that need to be asked, and whether we like to hear it or not, it needs to be addressed. So I cannot give you an answer, and I don't think any of my fellow panelists here can give you an answer, because we'll never satisfy it. What we can do though, we can go away and as a panel or as get hold of some leaders of the industry, we can pose this question. There was a question at the back there.
I'm Robert Bai from LPDA. I'm a bit concerned that we seem not to be acknowledged. Someone said once upon a time that a black person, you are on your own. This morning we hear that there's two associations that are existing, which is LIA and LIASA, and you are not being mentioned. LPDA has been registered with EXA. If you look at the PE stand, those black companies that are there, they came under the umbrella of LPDA. LPDA is also existing. LPDA is there to escape in because of the challenges that us, mostly people who are from the Salvation background, black people, are having in the lift industry. Hence, we started to form this association, whereby we're taking a person from leadership until he becomes a lift inspector. We have programs that are in place. We even met with TOL. We had meetings with Monyaki, a couple of guys who are not yet lift inspectors to find out what are the reasons are not yet lift inspectors. We take them through the training of them so that they can fill up the forms and become lift inspectors, because many people do qualify to become lift inspectors, but they're out there without information. So this is the concern I was just saying, that we are not being acknowledged and we are still existing out there, and we try to be known out in the market.
Okay, maybe just to answer the gentleman based on some of the issues that they raised with regards to training. Our training is governed by the National Qualifications Framework, and this framework put in place bodies like NEMT and QCTO. So all learning and development has to end in a trade test. There's no ways we can put people in the market without a trade test. And the trade test is governed by NEM. So that is to answer that question. And I think I'm talking on behalf of all the training centers, including Jackie's training center.
Can I come into this?
Yes, sure.
You know, sitting here and listening to like everybody talking, it is very clear that from the customer's perspective, from the user, from the industry experts, we are not on the same platform, we are not on the same boat. Our customers, the people that we are serving as experts, they are not sure and they do not know what we do, what we are regulated by, and what value and are putting into the industry, and what is the value for the money that they are paying to the lift industry. Because as I look at it, the industry is almost at a shame, because we've been existing. Lifts have been there before I even joined the lift industry. But it's really a shame that our clients do not know exactly what they are expecting from us as the experts. So I think from here we need to take it further and open another platform some other time, whereby we educate our clients, we educate the market about the lift industry so that they can really have an understanding. When we talk about transformation, when we address it to LEA, when we address it to LPDA, when we address it to LIASA, when we address it to consultants, where exactly do they fit in? What should they expect from each industry or with each association? Coming to LEA, as LEA, remember as an association, we represent the members of the association. And yes, with the members, we do drill them on transformation. But unfortunately, if the small company does not belong to the association, we cannot force, as a chairperson, I can't force the members of LEA to transform the small businesses. So I hereby encourage small businesses to say, come and join LEA. When you come join LEA, I'm going to be your voice, because you are going to be a member and you're going to be a member in good standing. And we can actually make sure that you transform. We can make sure that multinationals, they also contribute to the small companies. Yes, the small companies are here. They are here for recognition. On my first statement, I said, we need to come together and make sure that we do business unusual. This industry has tailor-made, you know, they've custom-made the industry driven it to a certain direction. Now, the clients are pushing, and I say, we don't want it in that direction, but unfortunately, they are pushing even on the sector that goes into regulation, whereby we cannot bend the rules. So we need to approach and say, Mr. Client, this I can give you, but when it comes to regulations and rules, I can't bend. And here are the rules. You are also privy, you are also open to look at them, read them, know about them, so that when you start employing, you know who you are employing. You know you can actually tailor-make the contract yourself as a client. Don't let the industry push the contract to you and you accept it like that, and then halfway down the line you start realizing that, you know what, there's something that is not in there. It is your house. I always make an example and say, in your house, you can't let your maid lock the room, change the lock, and then you can't have access. So if that's the case, don't let the lift companies push you to your corner and force you to do things. Regulations, rules, we can also act, we cannot bend. But there are other things that we know that you guys as the client, we can serve you, you can get from the industry. So transformation is really at a cornerstone to the LEA, and we can push it to the maximum. I pledge and I ask the small companies to come and be members of the LEA. For as long as I'm still sitting as chairperson there, I am really driving transformation.
Thank you. Who's running away? Okay, I'm going to throw a question out here now, and I'm going to aim my question at a colleague of mine, with Mr. Henny Hudson, who spoke on Tuesday. And we feel on the panel here that we haven't quite exhausted the question on manufacturing. We've spoken about how do we get young entrepreneurs into the manufacturing market. But let's look at this from a perspective of, it doesn't matter who's manufactured the lift. What sort of standards are we expecting to find? Because we can't have different standards for the lift. We have to measure the lift against one standard, because as an inspection authority, you only have one standard to measure against. So from a perspective of an entry barrier of a type of lifts that are coming into the market, from your perspective, would you agree or disagree that there has to be some form of regulation or entry to be able to manufacture a lift and sell it into the market? Can we just get Henny a microphone? Over there, behind you.
Thanks, Paul. Just to start off, I think people are putting South Africa on a back foot, thinking we do not have the skills. Denel, one of the biggest companies that used to manufacture top-grade military equipment, but times has changed in South Africa. Why do we not explore the knowledge that's within Denel? We were looking at electronics that they were talking about, but they so focus into specific things that we keep on forgetting about the resources we've got available to ourselves. So from government side is to go and look at Denel, and look at this brain drain that's happening at the moment, because Denel, the business that used to be there, is just not there any longer. We're looking at, we've got all these Chinese companies outside, and people bringing equipment into South Africa, and I think in my opening speech on Tuesday we were talking about it, is people are bringing in equipment from China. Who's looking at this equipment? So we've got all these small companies going out and say, yes, we want to open a business. We're going to get equipment from China. And they say that it complies to EN 81 or SANS 581. And the equipment comes into the country, not regulated, and we install it, and when the inspections gets done, and then afterwards, when we do the annexures or things, we start on picking up problems. On the annexure, when we inspect the annexure, we inspect it to the standards, but we do not go into the control systems of the elevators. And that's a big problem, because only once you start getting into incidents and things like that, then you start realizing, well, guys, there's something wrong here. And there's a breakdown between the actual supplier and the company that's installing and maintaining the equipment at the end of the day. And that's something we need to look at as well, to say we need to regulate equipment coming into the country to have a look. So it's not just the local manufacturing to say, listen, the production line equipment coming from China, we can't compete because of the labor and the production line cost that's involved. But we also have to look at actually governing this equipment that comes in. Because at this stage, anybody can go to China and just come in and say, listen, I've got a product that complies to the standards, I'll install this equipment. But we need to look into it, that someone actually goes and say, okay, listen, when we look at this equipment, we have to not just look at the surface side of it with the Annexure A or Annexure B, because these are the things that we check for the safety of the equipment. But also the workings of the equipment, what's behind it. The electronics, I think Jake said the other day, we're actually going to start bringing into the SABS side with the standards of the electronic side of the controllers. It's not happening at the moment. And at this stage, I believe we can manufacture. We do have the resources. Cost is obviously a problem that we've got, and we need to look at the cost side of it. So I can't see why we cannot go forth and actually start manufacturing with the resources we've got. We do however have to look at the equipment coming into the countries and just accepting what we are getting. Because at this stage, that's what's happening. Clients are going out, so at this stage, clients go out, they look what's affordable or the cheapest product on the market, and that's what they install into the building. We look at also people not putting, if it's direct dealings, for example, they get in with a product into the building, and that product design, even though it complies to the standards and regulations, we do not look at the longevity of that product, that it needs to last the next 5 to 10 to 20 years, because we're talking about the life cycle of 20 years. So when this equipment gets installed, then 5 years later we start having damaged ropes and things. Then they start running back to the client and blame whatever it is. But when we go and look at the actual design, the design is to the minimum, the brim of the requirement. So the factory supplying is not that much concerned about the maintenance side of it, because they're just supplying a product at a cost that somebody's willing to pay. It's a company then having to maintain, and the end client that needs to pay at the end of the day when that equipment doesn't work out in his building. Is that what you wanted to answer?
Thanks, Henny. Yeah, I think you've highlighted a few main points there, because it seems to me that we have a gap in between the purchaser who wants to buy the lift and the seller who's selling the lift, and it seems that there's no form of control in between that as to what the purchaser buys, because he's basically doesn't know what he's buying. He thinks he's buying a lift that's going to be reliable and safe, but somewhere along the line, the actual person who's selling him the lift, wherever he's sourcing it from, there seems to be an unknown quantity as to what is actually being imported into the country. So my question there is then, and maybe it's for a future discussion or for a panel to sit and listen, is should there not then be a nominated body that can attest that the lift is fully compliant with the regulation, EN 81 Part 1, Part 20, or however it's been written, that it is in full compliance? Because as we heard from the gentleman from the Lift Institute, that all lifts have to comply with the lift directive, But when it comes to compliance to EN 81 Part 20, certain countries or manufacturers become selective into what part of the standard they want to implement. In South Africa, we have the unique side of it that written into the OSH Act are 13 SABS standards, if I'm correct. And as they are written, those are what we have to fully comply with. And that is basically non-negotiable. That's how it is. It doesn't matter if you're a small SME or if you're a large multinational. That is actually what we have. My question there then is that how can we end up with these products that sort of comply with the lift directives, but comply more to the country of manufacturers' standards rather than to our standards. And that falls then on that person who's selling the lift, that he has to make sure that that is fully compliant. And then what happens when we find out that we actually cannot certify that lift correctly to the South African standards? So therein lies one of the problems as to why we have bad lift installations in South Africa. And it's something that needs to be addressed. Not at this forum, but maybe to suggest another platform going forward. How do we address the import of lifts into the country, or how do we address the manufacturing of lifts in the country? And how is that to be inspected or regulated, or rather certificated? Rather than regulated, I'd rather say certificated. That it doesn't matter whether it came in from Hong Kong, China, Russia, France, or manufactured local, that we have that sort of certification that gives us that sense of security. Moving on forward, if there's no more questions on the manufacturing side, what about our installers? Sorry, right at the back there.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Sorry, we've got a question at the back.
Yeah, not really a question, a comment, only if you guys can hear me. My name is Richard Machiche. I'm one of the lift companies who have installed some few units into the country. I've got a bit of a concern when I heard that some equipment that we are bringing to the country might not be compliant, because as far as I know that we have been regulated, like EN 81. As long as it complies with EN 81, like we are free to bring the equipment, the lift into the country. And as long as I can remember, not Otis on Schindler does manufacturing. Actually, there's no lift company which should be manufactured in Africa. So I've got a bit of a concern when I hear that some of the units that we bring into the country might be of substandard. But I know this is not a correct forum to argue about this, because some of us who have brought in the lifts into the country, and 10 years down the line, they're still running. And then as long as they're EN 81 compliant. So I got a bit of a concern that, when we become competitive with the so-called OEMs, and then our product are being questioned, it's a bit of a concern. And the second point, Robert mentioned that he's got his own organization, PDA. Yeah, our organization, which has got more than 25 black-owned companies, and then he's not been recognized. What does he have to do for our organization to be recognized, besides LEA and the other one, by the gentleman, the other by the podium? I don't know, maybe if you can address this question. What do we have to do for our organization to be recognized? What do we have to do? If you can have some answers, please. Thank you.
I don't know if you're going to get your answers, but I think Sanjeev might be able to do that.
DOL is here.
Do you want to talk? Okay.
I think Mr. Robert Mpai indicated that his association has had interactions with the Department of Labor. We've had a number of meetings with LPDA. We do recognize LPDA. What I meant earlier on is I was mentioning the associations that are involved in the maintenance and service of lifts. If at all LPDA is involved in the maintenance and service, my apologies. we do recognize LPDA fully. We do work with them. We've had a meeting with LPDA about a month ago. It's one of the associations that we work with. I wanted to comment on the products that are coming to the country. I don't know if we've got anyone from NRCS here today. Is there anyone from NRCS? Not. I fully support the proposal that maybe we need to establish a task team that will look into ensuring that we regulate products, because it's simple, we can do that. But the regulation is very clear that any lift that is installed in the country has to comply with the standards that are incorporated into the regulations. Now, if you want us to take it a step further, the industry will have to decide. We will do that. NRCS, I think they are more than ready to regulate products that are coming to the country. You need to just give us an indication. However, I think the task team will, because there might be some challenges in that. If it's not a fully assembled product, maybe they might have challenges there. But I'm leaving it to the task team to look at those aspects. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Monyaki.
Can I just comment on that? I think the challenge that the task team will face is that, remember, when the product already is here, somebody has paid for it. Now, when the task team find that it doesn't comply, who loses ultimately? You know, it's the end user, it's the client who actually does not have any information. Hence, it goes back to what I was saying, to say we need to educate our clients. We need to actually insist that our clients read the regulations, so that when they buy, they know what they are buying. Even if it's a service, a beer service, not a company that is manufacturing, they need to know what they are buying and what they expect that service actually to give to them.
I think if I can just come in, the solution would be to stop the products at the port of entry. And that is what Mr. Monyaki is alluding to. That is the function of the NRCS. NRCS is the National Regulator for Compulsory Standards. So if through the regulator we can make encourage compulsory standards to be enforced, it means that the NRCS inspectors would inspect the products before they enter the country, be it at the ports or the harbours or wherever. So that ultimately, I think, I agree with Mr. Monyaki, would be the answer to stopping non-standard products from coming into the country.
Thanks, Linda. Well, that's encouraging to know, because it is something to think about going forward. I'd like to just say, Linda, you got something to say there?
Just a comment on that. I think, to stop something at the port, which is quite a complicated process, shouldn't a company who's wanting to bring in a new product be making an application to someone within the country and getting approval with regard to the specs of that product, whether it meets the basic standard?
Yeah. See, that is, if I may, that is also the function of NRCS. So importers apply to NRCS, they get type approval, and only once that approval is granted, the product may enter. But part of the function of NRCS is once the approval for that type of product has been granted, the inspectors also do inspections at the port of entry to make sure that the products are continuously applied. But you are 100% right that the approval process starts by application.
Okay, thank you for that. So what you're saying is right now,
there is no such
thing. There is no such thing.
But if I'm not mistaken, and I don't want to speak on behalf of the department, but I think you are in consultation with NRCS, or you plan. to be in consultation with NOCs to establish such a scheme.
So it looks like there has to be another platform. It needs to be looked at. If somebody wants to bring a product into the country, then what are the procedures to be followed that doesn't restrict the growth of the industry, and that we have some form of assurity from the regulator that what is coming into the country is something that complies fully with our regulations going forward. So, as there is nothing there in place, it is something that we need to look for future actions going forward. This is not the platform to do it. And the people who need to be on that platform need to be identified. Similarly, we move on a little bit on installing lifts. Not many of the manufacturers or not many of the lift companies who are selling lifts in South Africa actually install those products. We reached a stage in the late 90s where the majority of, because the industry was a little bit in the doldrums, there was not a lot of new buildings or sales of lifts. It's not a huge market, that a lot of the major manufacturers decided to go on the outsourcing of installing the product. And it led to the certain companies who call themselves lift companies, but are actually the installers of lifts. They don't necessarily manufacture the product, they merely install the product. And I'm going to give you a very good example now. Being a lift consultant, being a project manager, when I go to a site, I like to see a full set of the engineering drawings of the lift, and I like to see the assembly drawings of the lift. I can assure you, as I sit here today, that very seldom are the installers on the sites that are asked to see this documentation, very seldom do they have a full set of engineering drawings or a full set of assembly drawings. They do it by feel. Experience, as Jackie's whispering to me. And it is. Many of the older installers, it doesn't matter whose product it is, they have a good idea how to do it. That doesn't help though when we have young people coming up that we have nothing to reference them on. We cannot teach experience. Experience has to be gained. We can show you the basics and we can show you what you should be doing and how to do it. The rest comes with experience. So that chap who's assembling a lift in a lift shaft is doing it by experience and he's not due to any particular standard. So one of the problems we have with lifts is, let's put aside that it is a perfectly good engineered product, and then the second part of it we find is being badly installed. Why is it badly installed? A, did that particular installer have specific knowledge of that lift that he's installing? Does he have all the information at his fingertips to know what he should be doing and how it should be done? Is he aware of all the regulations that he has to comply with when he's installing a lift? Because installing a lift is not just complying with the OSH Act and that particular regulation. We also have the building regulations to conform to. Lifts also have to comply with the electrical regulations. We have disability functions that we need to comply with. So in these installers, just about anybody can open up a business and call himself a lift installer if he has a general knowledge. Is that right? So I'm putting that question out there to see how you feel about that.
Good afternoon. I would like to comment on that. My name is Tawanda Tavinga. I'm from CIDB, responsible for the lift portfolio for
Just raise the mic up a bit, sir.
Okay. Within the DID, we have more than 300 lifts in our portfolio, and some of the challenges that have been mentioned here, we have experienced them firsthand. On the one that you have just mentioned, I will not mention company names, but we did have a service provider who imported an equipment which it was for the first time they were importing it. They didn't know how to install it. They installed it incorrectly. We only found out after carrying out investigation after an accident had happened. So what you are saying, it is real, it is happening in the industry. But I would also like to also add to the gentleman there. We also had a challenge with the inspectors as well, because after the equipment was not properly installed, the first line of defense would be the inspector who's going to check on the equipment, whether it was properly installed, the buffers, all safety equipment tested. In some instances, we found on the certificate it says the buffers were tested, but when we are checking after the investigation, we find the buffers are still in the plastics. There is no hydraulic oil inside the buffers. So we were also let down by the inspection side. And after that, we also took a decision to report the inspector to Engineering Council for Engineering Council to reprimand the inspector, and nothing happened. So from your side also, we also feel let down. I'm not sure was it a once-off incident where an inspector gets away with it, or it's also happening to other sites where inspectors, they are not doing proper job, but the regulating body, the Engineering Council, is not taking the necessary action. But going back to what you are saying, what you said, yes, it is happening. We've had challenges with service providers that call themselves installers. They do not have experience with the equipment that they are importing into the country. So even when I came here to this, and I saw lots of international companies, I also get worried when I see it is, while it's necessary, it makes business sense to form relationships with manufacturers, but you also have to skill yourself to install the equipment for that manufacturer to the standard for which the manufacturer has designed it. So it is a challenge that we have, which we cannot ignore.
Thank you for that, and I'm glad that you second what I said. I just want to, a section of it, what you spoke about, because what we're getting from this is, and I think our regulator here is taking notes, is that we do need to address the methodologies and how lifts are installed, who's installing them, and to what standards. Do they have any form of quality control systems in place? The staff that they're using, have they been trained and properly accredited? Do they have trade tests? Are they competent people in their own rights? But one aspect that you did speak about now, where you said that there was a failure on behalf of the inspectorates, and by implication on the accreditation of that. Now, I would like to pass this over to both, jointly to both Sanjeev and to Linda, because there are very strict protocols in place, and maybe where there could have been a failure in your instance is that how do you address your complaint? Who to? Because to become an accredited, to become a lift inspector is one aspect of it. So the accredited authority who issues the certificate is not a person, it's a body, it's an entity, it's a company. The person who did the inspection
is a person who is employed by that body. So we have two issues here. The inspector who actually did the inspection, and secondly, the inspection authority who issued that certificate. So I'm going to throw the first one over to Sanjeev. Is when you've got a complaint against a person who is a registered lift inspector, who has accreditation or registration with the Engineering Council, I want to throw that over to Sanjeev to answer, and then when he's made his answer, I want to throw over to the Accreditation Authority, which is Sinus with Linda, how you can address a complaint to them when you have a concern about the accreditation body. Because ultimately, the gentleman on my right here is the person who appoints, gives authority to that accredited inspection body to do that inspection. So I'm going to throw it this way first, and then maybe, Slugs, you want to take it up at the end.
Sanjeev first, but I just want to point out to you that SANAS does not accredit inspection bodies for annexure aids, which is what's the term? The commissioning inspection. So in the case that the gentleman mentioned, that would not fall under an AIA. So I'm going to not answer, I'll hand over to Sanjeev.
Okay. No, Linda's quite correct. The inspection authority has to get an accreditation from SABS. It has to comply with the ISO standard. And their job is to ensure that they have a management system in place that complies with that. Having got that though, and that's the only slight disagreement I have to get past Linda's accreditation first before I will get the authority. So I have to be accredited, I have to get that before I can get the permission to go out and inspect those. But let's talk about the complaint procedure.
Thanks. So from the GLE. I need to draw a differentiation between the registered lift inspector and the inspection. If you look at the regulation, the only place where there's mention of a lift inspector is under definitions. Registering as a lift inspector, all this means is you have that category of registration with the Engineering Council. It doesn't qualify you to do anything. So the Engineering Council will complaint against any registered person, it doesn't matter what discipline. If the complaint is to do with something ethical, relative to the code of ethics, code of practice as prescribed by the Engineering Council. And taking into account what I said, being a registered person, having the registration of the Engineering Council doesn't allow you to do anything. You as an individual have to form a company, or you'll be part of an entity, and that entity has to be accredited by SABS. Once you've got that accreditation, then you apply for approval from LIASA. And that's how you do the inspection. That's how you issue the certification. Part of the inspection company, their mandate, and in accordance with what they have to comply with in terms of the standard. And it doesn't matter whether you're a single person inspection company or you're a company employing any number of inspectors, etc., is that you have to have a complaints and appeals process in place as part of your system. So when you, as a client, has a query, if that query is directed to the company that did the inspection, that company is under obligation to tell you what their process is to handle that query or complaint. You need to furnish that process to you and any associated paperwork, and that process needs to be followed. So in a case like what you mentioned, and similarly other people may have had these scenarios where it's proven or you're unhappy with the report that you received from an inspection company, the query needs to be addressed to the company that did the inspection. And if you don't get a response from them, then you need to report it to the regulator. But that company is under obligation as part of their accreditation to send you a synopsis of their complaints and appeal procedure and to provide you a response. If if you don't get a response, obviously you need to escalate it to the higher authority. So that's one aspect. The second thing is, Linda mentioned something about commissioning this. And from the scenario you mentioned, it would appear that certain things we confirmed as done as part of one certificate, which is the compliance certificate, and on perusal of the commissioning documents or the actual condition of the apparatus, it seems to have not been done. In the regulation, the reference is made to a comprehensive report. The comprehensive report, for intents and purposes, is a compliance certificate. Part of the obligation of the company that's performing the inspection, the compliance inspection, is that they have to ensure that the commissioning documentation is in order. So, okay, I'm not an inspection company. Hypothetically, if I'm an inspection company performing the inspection in order to issue a compliance certificate, and Jackie's company is the company, or Jackie as an individual, the commissioning test, I still have the responsibility to check that the commissioning tests were done in order, because in the compliance certificate, I'm actually confirming the I have to confirm in the compliance certificate that the commissioning documentation is in order. That is the first section of the certificate. So at the end of the day, for anybody, whether you're a service provider, whether you're an owner, facilities manager, a representative from a parastatal who's managing your portfolio, the buck stops with the person that issues the certificate. And when I say person, it could be, we're talking about a company. It could be a single person company, whatever. But that company that issues the certificate, that's where the buck stops. Because in that process, whether it's a brand new elevator, that's the way it came from. If it's an elevator that's in service, or if it's an elevator that's been placed into service after an investigation, etc. According to the regulation, you need a comprehensive report in order to use the elevator. And that comprehensive report has to come from an approved inspection authority. So they have to accept the responsibility that comes with it. And in cases like you highlighted, and other similar cases, it needs to be reported to the authority, especially if you don't get a response from that inspection company.
I think, can we just let Mr. Monyaki just comment on that, and we'll take your point again.
I'm going to be brief. The inspection body that we're talking about, the system was introduced in 2012. So I'm not sure from the gentleman when this incident take place. But like Sanjeev is saying, we've got systems in place. This inspection body or the lead inspector, whoever that gave you the comprehensive report or the certificate, has to be taken on. So I'll have to have a word with you after this session. But definitely we've got systems in place. Even the general counsel, if that particular inspector is reported to EXA, EXA has got the systems in place to investigate that inspection. I mean the lift inspector. So I will have a discussion with you after this. But listening to all that you are saying here, I must say I'm shocked, because it tells me that we have actually reduced this industry into nothing. Because this is pure engineering work. You can't do engineering work without drawings, without competence. And that's why earlier on I was saying the users or the companies have got the responsibility. You can't just deputize someone to do work on your behalf. You still take overall responsibility. And engineering drawings, it's part of any work that you do. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to?
Yes, just to clarify, the incident, it happened before the change of regulations, where inspections later on required an inspection service providers instead of an individual inspector, which is why we took the matter to EXA, who were the regulating body for the registered person. Yes. And also on the part of the Annexure 1, as you clarified, on the Annexure B certificate, that is where you find the inspector ticking to say, yes, this is in order, this is in order. So to us, that is a competent person recognized legally to say, yes, the lift, it is everything, it is safe for public use. But then when it proves not safe and then we get into an accident, then that's when we take the necessary. And we followed up the procedures stated by EXA on how to seek redress in such a situation. Then also just to respond to the gentleman on the matter, I think the challenge with the lift industry is that it is too specialized. So most clients, they leave everything to the service provider, because the service providers, they are the ones that have an idea of how a lift or an elevator operates. It's not general knowledge available to general people. So now that's where we will need the first level of defense of the inspectors, who are also accredited to say, yes, this is safe for public. So to project managers, some project managers, they will be running a project, but without that technical know-how on how elevators work. That is the challenge that we see. Even with private buildings, they will have to rely on consultants who have that public knowledge, that technical knowledge on the equipment.
Thank you for that.
I've got a comment.
Who's got a comment?
Yeah. I've got a comment. I've been listening to you guys talking about this matter. I think this matter, more of AIAs, it's talking to Annexure Bs. It's talking to Annexure Bs. I just want to correct a statement here so that we don't discourage our young people and our mechanics who might be listening to this conversation, because, we're trying to make sure that our mechanics, they aspire to be lift inspectors. So we need to give them reasons why they should be lift inspectors, number one. Because if you are going to say, if you are a lift inspector, it's nothing, then there's no need for people to be lift inspectors. Then there's no need even for the young people to be mechanics, because then they're going to end up nowhere. So somehow, as a lift industry, we need to be careful to say, how do we make sure that we build appetite into mechanics really developing and moving further, and then using the skill of being a lift inspector, because they come to me and they ask me, why are we supposed to be lift inspectors when you're not going to use it? Is it because the companies, they want to abuse us when they do business with whoever to say we've got lift inspectors? So let's make this lift inspector thing to have purpose. And it's got a purpose, because I'm a lift inspector, I'm not an AIA, and I'm a consultant. And it is through that, because I put my certificate as my extra certificate to say, I believe I've got the skill to advise your likes as the client. And I've got the ability to check the AIAs, if they've done the work, to say, yes, Mr. Client, they have done the right thing. So it has got purpose to the lift mechanics, to the learners, to the apprentices. As I am pleading to you that don't look down on it. Let's push and become lift inspectors.
Thanks, Jackie. We started on manufacturing and we had a good debate. We went through to installing. We have basically flogged the inspection people almost to death there. But the main core of lifts, which is maintenance, ongoing maintenance in terms of the regulations, we haven't really touched on that. And I'd like to touch on the maintenance, because the maintenance addresses the longevity and safety of the lift. A lift is a very expensive capex item to install in a building. Some of them costing in excess of R1 million. For that, the investors want value for money, and they want to some form of assurity that that lift is going to last the lifespan that the manufacturer says it's going to achieve. So looking at maintenance, there's two aspects that we need to look at, and one is the SLA agreements, service level agreements, and the second one is what do the manufacturers say of how the lift should be maintained, and are lifts maintained according to the manufacturer's standards. One can read the OSH Act. It gives you a guideline of what the regulator expects from the owner of a lift. But I want to put it out to the floor now. If we're having so many problems with the lifts, well, clearly we have a problem with maintenance of lifts. And what do we need to do about it? Should companies who are maintaining lifts, do they also now need to be regulated? Do we now need to put more processes in place to ensure that a company that puts itself out there to maintain the lift is actually competent enough to do so, and that he fully understands the requirements of what is required from the OSH Act, from the lift, escalator and passenger conveyor regulations, and more importantly, what is required for what the manufacturer says. And thirdly on that, has a proper risk assessment been done inside that building to determine how the lift is used? And I mentioned when I did my presentation yesterday that the owner's responsibility comes into here as well. He is not innocent in this whole thing. He cannot just say, I'm appointing XYZ lift company to maintain my lift, and then walk away and say, well, that's it, I've done my job. I don't accept that. I don't accept that for a minute. As an owner of a lift in a building, you have a duty and a responsibility of safety to all people who enter your building and use your facilities. So looking at the maintenance, which is now one of those topics that seems to be that I pay thousands of rands a month for my lifts to be maintained, but they're always breaking down. I can never get hold of the service provider to come and fix my lifts. So I want to throw that out there for some comments and say, well, if those are the problems we're having, how do we solve that problem? What do we need to do? On the front here? Just get a microphone.
I was supposed to say first, but I don't know.
Sorry, I didn't see you, your hand up there.
Yeah, but my hand has been up since...
Sorry, I didn't see you there. The light is shining in here.
Okay. I don't know. He can start if he wants to.
The MC says.
Okay. The thing is taking you back to the issue of the imported products, whereby you got products that are imported, they are already installed, like the one in Joburg, and then no one is able to maintain that. So I think in the next session of this one, it is advisable to look at the quantity of products that are imported from, like, for example, China or India, and then you have one of the representatives here in this discussion panel, so that they can understand our challenges in terms of the regulations, in terms of the standards that are required. Because if you look at what is happening here today, our economy as a general is constrained in terms of capacitating the Department of Labor to look at the products that are coming in. And then the sister there talked about NR something. Yeah. So not all products will definitely be looked at, because I can tell you from public works point of view, for example, we have got an obligation to look at after the taxpayers' money, and we have a challenge of ensuring that all the lifts are installed correctly because of the capacity issue. So that's why a project manager will rely on the support, like the engineers, the QS, and so on. That's why when it comes to the issue of maintenance, we need to make sure that the manufacturers of China and so on are also represented here so that they can advise us how we can deal with this thing, because it's not locally manufactured.
That's a great point, and thank you for that. And I'm sure that the committee, if we have this sort of event again, will actually take that into consideration, that we have a panel of them to do exactly what you're suggesting. This, unfortunately, is going to be the last response that we can have, because we do need to close this session. So we're going to throw it back to DOL and the big boss himself here to give his point of view. Smolati.
Thank you, sir, for the opportunity to be able to speak. I think what we need to look at when we look at this industry, we need to look at the total competency, the competency of mechanics, the competency of lift inspectors, the competency of inspectors in the Department of Labor. When you look at these three, you're talking about the safety of lifts. Because when you have competent mechanics, they will service the lifts in a proper way based on the competence that they have. When you look at the AIAs, the inspectors within AIAs, they will do the proper inspections that are required. The other problem is that users also give pressure either to the AIAs, pressure to the maintenance companies, because they hold the purse, and therefore they give them the scope according to what they want to pay, and therefore lifts are maintained in terms of what the user wants. Lifts are inspected in terms of what the user wants. But if we can begin to build the competence and that people become professionals and they don't look at what the user has to offer and becomes professional and say, I'm not going to do what you say. I can rather lose the contract with you, but I'm going to do the right thing. And this is not only with lifts. I mean, I'm responsible also for electrical installation in South Africa. Why do we have electricians and electrical contractors signing certificate of competence from their back instead of doing inspections? It's because of the pressure that they have from users. The user says, this is how much I will be able to pay. And therefore, the quality of inspections, the quality of maintenance is based on what the user can offer. And therefore, you get mega services because what the users can give. But if we can train people to be competent and say, this is my professional status, and it's not going to be based on what you can offer. You'd rather keep your contract, because once when an inspector or a maintenance company does things like that, they will know that they will rather be ethical, and sometimes cheap becomes very expensive. You know that? Cheap becomes expensive because people compromise standards, they compromise morals because of cheap. And therefore we need to start to deal with cheap and do the right thing. The other issue that I wanted to mention here is with regards to regulators. Regulators, we need to make sure that we get competent regulators. We train our inspectors, we train assessors from SANAS and all those things, so that we have competent assessors, we've got competent inspectors. The other issue pertains to the economy of South Africa. It is imperative that we have manufacturers in South Africa. That we don't have these things that are produced, metal produced in South Africa, going there without adding value. Once when we begin, even when we start with components, it's going to add value. We're going to create jobs in South Africa. We must create jobs. We must create jobs in South Africa. If we can create jobs in South Africa, train people to be competent in South Africa, train also regulators, make sure that we have the standard and we have the right people that can enforce them. Because if our inspectors in the Department of Labor, inspectors in SABS, inspectors in NRCS, lead assessors from SANAS. Then we have a very solid regulatory framework. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I'd like to hand the mic back over to our MC now to close the session.